Welcome in, everyone. Grab a seat, get comfortable, and consider this your masterclass in secrets. Today, we are taking you into the heart of, well, probably the ultimate cryptographic puzzle.
Absolutely.
We are talking about a machine that quite literally altered the course of a global war, saved millions of lives, and laid the groundwork for the world we live in today. We are, of course, talking about the Enigma Machine.
It is arguably the most famous cipher device in human history. And our mission for today's session is to really look past the mythology of it all. We want to help you understand the brilliant engineering behind this device, the unprecedented mathematical genius that was required to crack it, and how this invisible high-stakes shadow war essentially birthed the modern information age.
So let's start at the beginning, because the origin story of the Enigma usually surprises people. When you picture this machine, you naturally imagine top-secret military bunkers, U-boats, wartime espionage.
Right, the classic movie scenes.
Exactly. But its actual roots were entirely civilian. Back in 1918, a German electrical engineer named Arthur Scherbius patented the first Enigma. And he was not designing this for generals or spies.
No, not at all.
He built it for commercial businesses, specifically banks.
Which makes perfect sense when you look at the technological landscape of the 1920s. I mean, we were just entering the era of wireless telegraphy. Suddenly, communication wasn't just happening over closed physical wires.
Right, it's just out there.
It was being broadcast through the air. That meant anyone with an antenna could intercept a corporate message. The industrialization of communication demanded the industrialization of secrecy, and Scherbius saw a highly lucrative market in corporate confidentiality.
Except his grand vision was a massive commercial flop.
The total disaster, yeah.
The early models, which were known as Enigma A and Enigma B, they were not those sleek, portable little boxes and wooden cases that you see in modern museums. They were absolute beasts.
Oh, they were huge.
We are talking about 110-pound machines with built-in heavy-duty typewriters. They were incredibly expensive to manufacture, and for a bank, the exorbitant cost and the sheer physical bulk just were not worth the hassle.
And the printing mechanism of those massive early machines was notoriously clumsy. It jammed, it broke, and it frustrated operators to no end.
If you are enjoying this video, please watch it until the end. This greatly helps the channel and encourages us to continue our work.
So the failure of those early models forced Scherbius to go back to the drawing board and completely rethink the user interface. He realized he had to abandon the physical typewriter output entirely if he wanted this to be a viable product.
So what did he do?
Moving forward from those failures, he developed the glow lamp models, which became the Enigma C and D. Instead of printing the encrypted letter onto paper, he installed a panel of small light bulbs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when an operator pressed a key on the keyboard, an electrical circuit was completed, and a single bulb would illuminate to show the encrypted letter. That one design pivot made the machine vastly lighter, much cheaper to produce, and crucially, portable.
But in his desperation to recoup his investments, Scherbius made a blunder that is almost comical in hindsight.
It really is.
He sold these portable Enigma D machines internationally to anyone who had the cash. They were shipped to businesses and governments in Sweden, Japan, Italy, and beyond.
Yep.
Which meant that foreign intelligence agencies didn't need to steal one. They could literally just buy it out of a catalog and study its internal mechanics on their own time.
It was a staggering security oversight. By putting the physical hardware on the open market, the designers allowed the world's cryptanalysts to dissect the machinery years before any global conflict began. They knew exactly how the commercial version worked.
But then the military got involved.
Right. The German military eventually woke up to the potential of the device. The German Navy adopted a modified version in 1926, and the Army followed in 1928.
They didn't just use the commercial one.
No, when the military took control, they added a crucial, exclusive feature that changed the math entirely. The Steckerbrett, or the plug board.
Okay, this is where we need to look under the hood.
Yeah.
Because to appreciate how hard this was to break, we have to understand what the machine was actually doing. So walk me through the physical journey of a single letter.
Sure.
If I sit down at a military Enigma and press the letter A, what is happening inside that box?
Right. Imagine you press the A key. You are sending an electrical current into the machine. First, that current travels to the front of the machine, to the military plug board you just mentioned. Here, an operator might have plugged a physical cable connecting the A socket to the O socket. So instantly, before it even reaches the main encryption engine, your A is swapped to an O.
So it's already scrambled once.
Exactly. From there, the signal enters a static component called the entry wheel, which feeds it into the core of the machine, a sequence of 3 scrambling rotors, known in German as the Walzen.
And these are the things that look like thick hockey pucks,
He's
right?
right. Yeah, like pucks with a mess of cross-wired connections inside. The current weaves through the scrambled internal wiring of the first rotor, then exits and enters the second rotor, gets scrambled again, and then goes through the third rotor.
And then it hits the component that makes the Enigma so unique, the reflector, or the Unkervalsi.
Yes. The reflector takes that electrical signal and bounces it right back the way it came.
Wow.
So the current travels backward through those exact same 3 rotors, getting scrambled 3 more times on the return trip. It exits back through the entry wheel, goes back through the plug board where it might get swapped one final time if there's a cable connected, and finally it reaches the lamp board, lighting up a bulb. Let's say it lights up the letter H.
That is an incredibly complex pathway for a single keystroke.
Very.
And the mathematics behind it are just terrifying. Because to read a message, the receiving operator had to have their machine set up in the exact same configuration as the sender.
That's where the daily key settings came in, and they were multi-layered. First, you had the ring stelling. Think of this like the internal pins of a padlock.
Okay.
Before you even put the rotors into the machine, you had to twist the outer alphabet ring relative to the internal wiring core.
Right.
Then you had the Grindstellum. To continue the padlock analogy, this is the combination you dial in on the outside. It's the initial starting positions of the 3 rotors visible through the little windows on top of the machine.
Got it.
And finally, you had to know the exact configuration of those plugboard cables at the front.
And the plug board is really what pushed the math into the stratosphere, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt.
The theoretical key space of this machine, the total number of possible ways it could be configured, was 3 times 10 to the power of 114.
A number so big it's hard to even comprehend.
Right, but even if we just look at the practical daily military use, the number of possible combinations on any given morning was 10 to the 23rd power.
Yeah.
That is 150 quintillion combinations.
To give you a sense of scale for that number, imagine you had 100,000 operators. If each one of them tested a different setting every single second of every single day, it would take twice the age of the universe to check them all.
That's just mind-blowing.
The German High Command looked at that math and concluded that their communications were mathematically impenetrable.
But the Germans were absolutely convinced that 150 quintillion combinations made them invincible, completely forgetting one crucial thing.
What's that?
Machines have physical, mechanical quirks, and the Enigma had a big one.
Yes, it operated a bit like the odometer in your car. Every time you pressed a key, the rightmost rotor would click forward 1 position. This meant the internal electrical pathway changed with every single keystroke.
Right.
If you pressed A 3 times in a row, it wouldn't come out as HHH. It might encrypt as H, then X, then P.
Which is brilliant for security. But the quirk comes in with how the rotors interact, right?
Yeah.
The double-stepping anomaly.
Exactly. Each rotor had a physical notch on it. When the right rotor completed a full revolution, that notch would catch a gear and turn the middle rotor 1 space.
Just like the miles rolling over on a dashboard.
Precisely. But because of how the internal pawls and gears were designed, there was a specific condition where the middle rotor would rotate, step the left rotor, and then on the very next keystroke, the middle rotor would be dragged forward and rotate again.
A double step.
Right. It was a mechanical hiccup that slightly reduced the maximum period of the cipher, providing a tiny mathematical foothold for code breakers.
But that wasn't the fatal flaw. The real Achilles heel of the Enigma was that reflector we talked about. Earlier, you said the reflector bounced the signal back through the rotors.
Yes.
The Germans designed it this way for ease of use, because it made the machine reciprocal. If A encrypted to H, then H would decrypt back to A using the exact same daily settings.
Right. You didn't need to flip a switch between an encrypt mode and a decrypt mode.
Which is incredibly convenient for a stressed soldier in the field.
Sure. But mathematically, it was ticking time bomb. Because the signal had to enter the reflector on one wire and exit on a completely different wire, a letter could never encrypt to itself.
Never.
Never. If you pressed A, the A bulb was physically incapable of lighting up. Ever. This reciprocal nature was a massive structural weakness that cryptanalysts would eventually exploit with ruthless precision.
And this brings us to who actually exploited it first. We need to emphatically shatter a major historical myth here. When most people think of breaking the Enigma, they instantly picture British scientists at Bletchley Park.
Right, the standard narrative.
But long before Bletchley Park even existed as a wartime code-breaking center, the Polish Cipher Bureau, the Bureau Cifro, took on this Leviathan in 1932.
You really have to look at the geopolitical reality of Poland at that time. Geographically, they were wedged between an increasingly aggressive, militarizing Germany to the west and the Soviet Union to the east.
Not a great place to be.
No. They recognized the existential threat. They knew that if they couldn't read German communications, they wouldn't survive. But the older generation of code breakers were largely linguists. They looked for common letters, syntax, and language patterns.
Which works for old codes.
Exactly. But the Polish Bureau realized very early on that the military enigma wasn't a linguistic puzzle. It was an engineering and mathematical problem.
So they did something entirely revolutionary for the time. They bypassed the linguists, went to Bosnia University, and hired 3 brilliant young mathematicians.
Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Roki, and Henryk Zagalski.
Rejewski was really the vanguard of this effort, wasn't he?
He was. He approached the 150 quintillion combinations not by trying to guess words, but by applying permutation group theory. Now, without getting bogged down in complex equations, essentially, group theory allowed him to study the structure of the permutations independently of the plugboard.
Bypassing the hardest part of the math.
Yes. He was looking at the underlying cycles of the rotors. But to make his equations work, he needed to know the internal wiring of the military rotors, which were a closely guarded secret.
Fortunately, human espionage came through where math couldn't. French intelligence had cultivated a spy deep inside the German cipher office.
A man named Hans Thilo Schmidt.
Right, codenamed Asche.
Asche provided the French, who then shared it with the Poles, a couple of months' worth of daily key sheets. This allowed Rejewski to isolate the variables.
But he still had one massive hurdle.
Right. How are the keys connected to the entry wheel? In the commercial machines, they were wired in the order of a German typewriter quartz. Rejewski spent countless hours trying to make his equations balance using that quartz assumption, but the math kept failing.
And then he makes this astonishingly simple, brilliant leap of logic.
He did. He thought, what if the military engineers were actually quite lazy? What if, instead of a complex typewriter layout, they just wired the keyboard to the entry wheel in simple alphabetical order?
Just A, B, C, D, E, F.
Exactly. He plugged that incredibly simple assumption into his complex equations, and suddenly, the rotor wirings just fell into place. He had mapped the heart of the machine without ever seeing it.
That is amazing. And once they had the wiring, the Polish team didn't stop there. They invented early computational technology to automate the deciphering process.
Right.
Rejewski created a device called the cyclometer to map out all the rotor cycles. Then Zagalski developed these perforated paper sheets.
The Zagalski sheets.
Yeah, think of them like massive layers of Swiss cheese.
Yeah.
By sliding these sheets over a light box, when the holes aligned and you could see light shining all the way through, you knew you had found the correct rotor positions.
It was ingenious.
And most famously, they built the Bombe cryptanalysis, an electromechanical machine that simulated multiple enigmas hooked together to grind through the possible settings.
It was an astonishing achievement. But by 1939, the winds of war were howling. The Germans began adding more rotors to their inventory and increasing the complexity of their daily procedures.
It was overwhelming the Polish resources.
Complete.
Which sets the stage for one of the most traumatic meetings of the 20th century, July 1939. Just 5 weeks before German tanks would roll across their borders and ignite World War II, the Poles organized a highly secret rendezvous in the Pyry Forest just south of Warsaw. They invited top British and French intelligence officers who thought they were just going to compare notes. Instead, the Poles handed over everything.
They gave them the underlying mathematics, the decryption techniques, and exact working replicas of the military enigma.
The British and French were absolutely stunned.
It was an unparalleled act of Allied cooperation. Without the Pyry meeting, the Allies would have been years behind. British cryptologists would have had to start from absolute scratch while bombs were falling on London.
With the Polish foundation in hand, the narrative shifts to Bletchley Park in England. And what the British did was take this brilliant academic breakthrough and scale it up into a massive industrialized code-breaking factory.
Factory truly is the best way to describe it. Bletchley Park evolved from a small group of eccentric academics into a sprawling intelligence operation that eventually employed around 10,000 workers.
Wow.
And we have to highlight that a vast majority of this workforce were women, heavily drawn from the Women's Royal Naval Service, or WRNS. They were the backbone of the operation, running the machinery, cross-referencing intercepts, and maintaining the grueling pace of this intelligence conveyor belt.
And leading the mathematical charge was a name most people know, Alan Turing. But Turing faced a massive crisis in May 1940.
Right, the Germans changed their operating procedures again.
Which instantly rendered the old Polish Bombe methods completely obsolete. Turing needed a new way in.
He turned to a technique involving cribs. A crib is essentially an educated guess of a piece of plain text hidden within the encrypted gibberish.
Okay.
Turing realized that because the German military was so rigidly bureaucratic, they sent highly predictable messages. A weather report sent at 6:00 a.m. every single day would almost certainly contain the word Wetter, the German word for weather.
Or a routine status update might always end with the phrase keine Zusätze, meaning no additions.
Exactly.
And this is where that fatal mechanical flaw of the Enigma comes back to haunt the Germans. Because a letter could never encrypt to itself.
Right.
Turing could take that guess word, like Wetter, and physically slide it underneath a string of intercepted ciphertext. If any letter matched, if a W lined up with a W or an E with an E, he knew instantly that he had the wrong position.
He could just slide it along the message until there were absolutely no letter matches.
That brilliant deduction became the logical basis for the British bomb machine. Turing designed this massive, clattering machine to simulate the electrical circuits of dozens of Enigmas simultaneously, hunting for the specific rotor positions that would allow that crib to exist.
But Turing's initial design was a bit slow. It took another brilliant mathematician, Gordon Welchman, to supercharge it with an invention called the diagonal board.
How did that work?
Welchman's diagonal board was a masterstroke. He realized he could exploit the reciprocal symmetry of the Enigma's plug board. If A was plugged into O on the front of the machine, then O definitively had to be plugged into A.
Of course.
By hardwiring this reciprocal logic directly into the bomb, the machine could instantly recognize and eliminate millions of false positive stops. It drastically sped up the process of finding the daily key from days down to hours.
Once they perfected this technology, Bletchley Park organized into highly specialized divisions. Hut 6 handled the Army and Air Force traffic, while Hut 8 handled the Navy. But the naval war, the Battle of the Atlantic, was a completely different beast, wasn't it?
It was arguably the most perilous theater of the entire war for Britain. The Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, operated with far stricter cryptographic protocols than the Army. They used extra rotors, and their operators were disciplined.
They knew that protecting their U-boat wolf packs was the key to starving Britain into submission.
And in February 1942, Admiral Karl Dönitz dropped a hammer on Bletchley Park. He introduced the M4 Enigma for his U-boats, which squeezed a fourth thin rotor into the machine.
4 rotors.
That fourth rotor caused a devastating 10-month blackout. Bletchley Park was completely blinded. They couldn't read the U-boat traffic at all, and the human cost was catastrophic.
Without the ability to route supply convoys around the wolf packs, the Allies suffered horrifying shipping losses in the freezing waters of the Atlantic.
To break the M4, mathematical theory simply wasn't enough. They needed physical evidence. They needed what the code breakers called a pinch.
Capturing physical codebooks from enemy ships before they could be destroyed.
These pinches were some of the most daring and terrifying naval operations of the war. Earlier on, the HMS Bulldog managed to capture the U-110, seizing an intact machine and vital codebooks.
But to break the 4-rotor shark cipher, the heroism reached another level.
It really did. The HMS Petard engaged the U-559 in the Mediterranean. As the German submarine was taking on water and rapidly sinking in the pitch black, British sailors literally swam over, climbed down into the flooded, sinking vessel, and managed to heave the vital M4 codebooks up the conning tower before the sub went down.
Taking 2 British sailors with it.
Yes.
It's just staggering bravery.
Yeah.
But even with those captured codebooks, the British bombs weren't fast enough to crunch the math for 4 rotors on a daily basis. They needed serious industrial muscle.
Which brings the United States into the fray. The U.S. Navy partnered with an engineer named Joseph Desch at the National Cash Register Company in Dayton, Ohio.
NCR.
Right. Desch and his team were tasked with building an American version of the bomb.
And the Americans supersized it. They built 120 high-speed bombs. And importantly, instead of relying on the mechanical relays used in the British machines, Dash used vacuum tubes.
That shift to electronic components made the American machines vastly faster. They provided the sheer computational brute force needed to crack the four-rotor daily keys consistently for the remainder of the war.
But getting the intelligence, which was given the highly classified code name Ultra, was only half the battle.
Yeah.
How do you actually use that information without tipping off the Germans that you're reading their mail?
Exactly.
If you suddenly sink every U-boat in the Atlantic, the Germans are going to know their code is compromised.
The Allies had to exercise agonizing restraint. They created elaborate ruses to protect the secret of Ultra. For instance, if Ultra intelligence revealed the location of a German supply convoy, the Allies wouldn't just attack it.
What would they do?
They would first send a spotter plane to conspicuously fly over the convoy and discover it. That way, when the Allied destroyers showed up, the Germans had a plausible explanation for how they were found. They would blame the spotter plane, not their unbreakable Enigma.
That discipline paid off in some of the most decisive battles across the globe. In North Africa, Ultra intelligence allowed the Allies to pinpoint the exact shipping routes of the tankers fueling General Rommel's tanks. They effectively starved his desert army of fuel.
And its role in D-Day cannot be overstated. The Allies orchestrated a massive deception campaign known as Operation Bodyguard to convince Hitler that the invasion was going to happen at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy.
They built a fake army, FUSAG, under the command of General George Patton.
Yes, and thanks to Ultra, the Allies weren't just guessing if the deception was working. They were literally reading the German High Command's internal communications, confirming that Hitler had completely swallowed the bait. It was like playing high-stakes poker while seeing your opponent's cards.
After the war ended, you'd think this monumental achievement would be celebrated from the rooftops. But instead, Winston Churchill ordered the bombs to be completely dismantled and destroyed.
The engineers were sworn to secrecy.
The story of Ultra was kept under lock and key as the Cold War began, and the public didn't even know this happened until 1974.
It was a secret kept for nearly 30 years. Today, historians widely agree that the intelligence gathered from breaking the Enigma shortened the war by 2 to 4 years, saving millions upon millions of lives.
And the legacy goes far beyond the battlefield. The theoretical work that Alan Turing did to defeat the Enigma laid the direct groundwork for modern computing.
It also cemented a fundamental rule of cybersecurity that we still use today, right? Kirchhoff's law.
Yes. Let's talk about that.
Kirchhoff's law essentially states that a cryptographic system must be secure even if everything about the system, except the key, is public knowledge. Think of it like the deadbolt on your front door.
Okay.
Everyone knows exactly how a deadbolt works. The mechanical mechanism isn't a secret. The security relies entirely on the fact that only you possess the physical key. The Germans tried to invent a brand new type of lock, but left the key under the mat because they trusted the obscurity of the machine.
It is truly incredible to think that a clunky machine, originally built to secure bank transfers, ended up sparking the digital computer revolution.
It is a profound historical irony, and I'll leave you with a final thought to ponder today. The Germans placed absolute blind faith in their technology. They thought the 150 quintillion combinations made them invincible, completely ignoring the human element, the lazy operators, the repeated greetings, and the physical quirks of the machine itself.
Yeah.
In our modern era of quantum encryption and digital surveillance, where we put all our trust in complex algorithms, are we repeating the exact same mistake by blindly trusting our own unbreakable systems? What I wonder is the Enigma machine of today.
If viewers enjoyed the video, they can subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell to be notified about new videos, click the like button, and share the video with their colleagues as this helps us maintain the channel. Thank you.